live game drive here in the wilds of the Kruger National Park. Hashtag Safari Live or questions at wildearth.tv if you want to talk to us. And we do love it when you do talk to us. So please send through your questions or comments to those two through those two media, and let us know anything you want to know or ask us anything you want to know. On camera today we have Wiam the wildebeest. There we go. Dressed in a sort of summery khaki today and a hat older than Methuselah. My name is James Hendry, and it is my duty to take you on a magnificent game drive through this incredible wilderness. In the control room today we have Tara Dales in her sultry tones and the red hair of Kirsty, who has a double-barreled long surname that I'm not going to say on camera. And then on the other vehicle we have the irascible Brent Leo Smith. He was currently on foot trying to track Karula, the Queen of Nkuhuma, and on camera with him I believe is Brian. Correct, yeah? Yes, it's Brian. He was singing when he left, and so I remember now. So, you are most welcome. Just while we sit here, I'm just going to give you an idea of where we are. So obviously we're in Africa, which is a fairly large continent, and off to the far, far north we've got the sort of Mediterranean coastline, and then we're just going to move south through Africa from there to where we are now. So as you move south from that, you hit the wastelands of the Sahara Desert and the incredible culture and ancient cultures from there, and then the Sahel south of that, which is a sort of semi-arid dry area, again very rich culture and some very rich wildlife land. South of that, the enormous Congo basin with the incredible rainforests of Central Africa with chimpanzees and iconic gorilla species. And to the east of that, of course, is East Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and their iconic wildlife lands of the Masai Mara and the Serengeti, Amboseli, and places like the Selous Game Reserve. South of that, into southern Africa, where you have this kind of bushveld where we are now, this sort of closer to here. And then into the south of southern Africa is South Africa, funnily enough. And we are sitting in the Kruger National Park, an iconic wildlife heritage reserve, almost 100 years old now. Its predecessors are more than 100 years old, but in its current form it's almost 100 years old. So that's where we are now, and you're on a little piece of it with us called Nkuhuma, which is 900 hectares of this magnificent area on the western borders of the Kruger National Park. And just to our west is a little reserve called Arathusa, which we also traverse. Now it's important that you realize, despite the fact that we're operating on 1,500 hectares, we're actually part of 3.5 million hectares of totally unfenced wildlife land. So there's a fence to the west and a fence to the east, but in between, although we can't go, the animals are free to move as they like throughout that 3.5 million hectare reserve. So that, in a sort of brief nutshell, is where you find yourself now, and more specifically you find yourself in the southern end of Nkuhuma at a sighting of a 1-year-old leopard. So let's have another look at him, and then I'll tell you just a little bit about what he's doing here, why he's here, and what's happening in his life, which is taken on somewhat tumultuous times since yesterday evening. So young Sindile there, so named by the Twitterverse and our faithful followers and observers, is a year old. His mother last night found his father again, and they have been attempting with great enthusiasm to produce him a sibling. Now that is very unusual in that the sort of birthing interval is normally 17 months to 3 years, and she is now, so I mean, if she does give birth at the end of this mating session, the birthing interval will be 15 months. And I'm still a little bit worried for his future, because I don't think necessarily that she will pay him as much attention as she needs to at this tender age of his life. But I was chatting to Scott, who had seen something similar down at Singita, which is not too far from here, and he's seen a leopard situation like this with a young male, probably a bit older than Sindile, say 15 months old, and his mother mated, and she had new cubs, and the older male, the older sibling, just simply tagged along with the new cubs, shared at kills. He wasn't always with them, but he certainly tagged along and kept an eye on where they were, and managed to survive and went into adulthood. So I think things for Sindile are perhaps not as bleak as I thought they might be yesterday. And I'm most pleased to say that he looks perfect. Yeah, he still looks pretty full. And again, I've been saying for a while that I think he makes quite a few kills on his own without his mum. I've never seen him looking skinny, and that holds true again today. We did find him this morning. Andrew and I spent a bit of time with him. We weren't on camera or on presenting, and we were on a little tracking team, and we spent some time with him, and he was frolicking about the place, playing, climbing in trees, jumping over termite mounds and leaping into logs, which was just great to see. So he seems to be full of beans, as they say. So the other interesting thing, of course, that's happened over the last day is that we've had, obviously, his mating parents, and then this morning, Brent was with Karula. Now, last night, when we left Shadow, who is Sindile's mother, and Tingana, Sindile's father, they were going south into the drainage line, south of Vuyatel Dam, or Juma Dam, where the camera is, and they were still mating. And very interestingly, as one of our viewers pointed out, Shadow found herself in Karula's territory, right in the sort of middle of it, and that is not entirely unusual when females are seeking to mate. Karula is Shadow's mother, so Sindile's grandmother. I hope you're writing this all down because it can get a little confusing, and so it's not entirely unusual for a female leopard to go out of her territory to seek a mate, except that Tingana was also out of his territory. Not his traditional territorial lands. He was in the territory of Mvula. He was a slightly smaller and slightly older male leopard, and he tends to hang around, also around Juma and in this area, and the two of them were basically both out of territory. Karula emerged, I suspect, as a result of this incursion this morning. She had been hanging around south of us, and I think she's come back into this area in order to investigate exactly what's going on, and I'm kind of hoping that Mvula might do the same thing. Mvula, as far as we know, is not related to any of these leopards, so the other 3 or 4 are related, but Mvula doesn't seem to be. So, interesting time for the leopards around here, and lion-wise, equally this morning, it was amazing. The Nkuhuma pride, which was on Nkoro, just south of us, they came across the Birmingham 5, the Birmingham boys, famed for their beautiful blonde salon quality hair, and they are in the midst of a pride takeover. In fact, I think you could probably say that they've already taken over this area. The Tuma timber males seem to have disappeared with their tails firmly between their legs. I thought it would take much longer than that, but they seem to have disappeared. Anyway, the Nkuhuma pride was split up, and I think that's because Junior, who is the 3.5-year-old male who lives with the Nkuhuma pride, he was born into the pride, I think it's because he's with them. And he and another one ran off in one direction, and the others disappeared, and they're all, the Junior is just north of here. Scott's going to go and sit with them and see what they're doing. They're not particularly entertaining at this time of the day, and if they do start to move and try and meet up with the rest of the Nkuhuma pride, we'll definitely go and have a look and see what's going on there. Other than that, there have been elephants around, there have been buffalo around, there have been all sorts of interesting things. So quite a lot going on Juma at the moment, which is excellent because there was quite a quiet time for a little while. So we're just looking at Sindile lying here on the ground in the shade under a guarri bush. Now the guarri bush, of course, is an extremely important part of a leopard's territory. And Sharon in Pittsburgh, an interesting question you ask about whether he's marking territory. You say you've seen him spraying. He's probably practicing, like you suggest. He's coming into puberty now, so he will start to think about things like marking territory, but it certainly won't be anything sort of serious in the way of marking territory. And the important thing to realize there is that all leopards, male and female, are territorial. So while he will mark territory, absolutely, eventually, and defend a territory when he turns about 4 or 5, so the females will do the same, probably from about 3 or 4 years old. When they're a bit younger, they tend to take a territory. So that's what happens, Sharon. They are definitely both very territorial and will defend territories against the same sex. But they won't defend territories against the opposite sex. So a male territory will encompass 3 or 4 different female territories. And he's about a year old now. He will probably leave his natal territory completely when he's 2.5 to 3 years old. I'm hoping he's going to hang around for that length of time, even if his mum does have new cubs. And then he'll wander. He'll become what we call a nomadic male. And there are 2 other nomadic males around the area at the moment, and that's Quarantine and Nkuhuma, who are born to him. I'm trying to decide what their relationship would be exactly. They'd be his uncles, wouldn't they? They're his uncles. Born to Karula, his grandmother. And so they are now at that stage where they will wander around and start to seek out a territory. Now eventually, when they're big enough, and that's normally when they're about 4 or 5, they will take a territory. And that will the area in which that is taken will depend very strongly on what other males are around. So let's pretend that this fellow survives around here and gets big and strong. Where he takes a territory, whether he kicks Tingana out or Mvula out or the Anderson male or some other male, or if he moves away completely, will depend on the strength of the resident territorial male. A good example of how it happens is Tingana, who comes from away south in the Sabi Sands, and Mvula actually, who's the other territorial male that we see fairly regularly, or certainly used to, comes from quite close by. So it really does depend on where the vacuum opens up and where the hole opens up for them to come and take a territory. Right, so while we look at the back end of little Sindile there, we're going to go across to Brent. He has been tracking Karula. I'm not sure if he's found her or not, but he'll certainly give you an update. So go and get an update from him. I'm probably going to reposition so that we can get a look at this wonderful leopard's face, and I'll see you just now.
Thanks. Good afternoon and welcome on the Sunset Safari. My name's Brent and I have Brian, and together sometimes we're known as the Killer Bees. So hopefully we're going to be able to live up to that nickname. And we're on a live safari and we've just come off a leopard, orchid, but we are in search of another leopard, one that's a firm favorite of a lot of our viewers, Karula, also known as the Queen of Djuma. We watched her hunting for quite some time on the Sunrise Safari, and we're now trying to see if we can find her again. Last place we had her was just up behind us in this drainage line. She's gone into an area in typical Karula fashion, almost impossible to track through, lots of stones and whatnot. So I'm hoping my guessing brain is working well, and I'm trying to guess where she's gone to next. Scotty's out on the tracking team. He's also giving me a hand, and he's checking down there to see if the track's crossed there. If no luck, then I think she might have gone the opposite direction to which I've guessed first, and we'll move back into that area and go have a look. And if we don't get any success with Karula, we will definitely be following up on the Nkuhumas and hopefully being able to see that joining up of the two splits from the pied that's probably been caused by the Birmingham boys chasing them somewhere down to the east yesterday or last night. We're not 100% sure when. So enjoy the sunset safari, and while we're still tracking, I'm going to hand you back to James, who's with Karula's grandson Sindile, and hopefully we'll be back a little bit later with Karula.
Hello everybody, and welcome back from that rather short sighting of Brent Leo Smith. He does like to get out on foot and wander about, hoping to find some kind of an animal, and let's hope he's successful. I'm a little bit jealous of him because I've only seen Karula once, and she was in the tree eating a hapless bushbuck which she had devoured most of. But we did spend a wonderful 2 drives, or 6 hours or so with her, which was amazing. So I'm rather hoping to see her fairly soon, and perhaps this incursion from Shadow will encourage her to spend a little bit more time on Nkuhuma, which of course I think is an excellent idea. Sindile is in sweet repose under the tree, as you can see. And there's been a lot of sort of concern and worry about what's going to happen if he comes across various different leopards and in the area and various territorial males. And I was talking about Karula, and I was talking about Mvula. And Donna, you want to know what will happen to him if he were to come across, say, Karula or Mvula. Karula is his grandmother, so there seems to be some kind of kin recognition when they do come across their grandmothers. They're certainly in an area called Londolozi, just south of here. There was actually been an incident where a leopard kidnapped her. I'm just trying to think of the correct term. A leopard adopted one of her daughter's cubs. So her daughter had 3 cubs, and she adopted one of them and raised it as her own. So I think were Karula to find young Sindile here, I think there would be some form of kin recognition, I think probably based on smell. But were Mvula to find him, I think it would be a very different story. Now remember, as I've said before, the major killer of leopards, look at his beautiful coat there, the major killer of young leopards is other leopards, especially male leopards. So I think you'd find that Mvula would take exception to Sindile's presence, and there would certainly be something of an issue. I think he'd probably try and kill him. But who knows? Who knows what would happen? We had a wonderful, wonderful morning of 4 leopards, unbelievable, a pride of lions, and all of them moving and giving us great action and entertainment, and we didn't know where to turn. And Dr. Debbie wants to know, have we ever seen that number of cats in such a small area before? Dr. Debbie, the Sabi Sands is famous for producing sightings like that, you know. Sometimes, obviously, you've been along with us when we found very little on Nkuhuma or Arathusa, but at this time, I mean, it's very difficult to tell why it happens, but sometimes in the Sabi Sands you do have these unbelievable days. And certainly one day at Londolozi we had 9 leopards in one sighting, which was absolutely incredible. I think there were 2 females with their cubs, and I think the 2 females were sisters, so they had their 2 cubs there, and then there was a territorial male there and a sub-territorial male, and all of them kind of wandering around the same clearing. An absolutely amazing sighting. In other days you don't find anything at all. Some days, I think there were at one stage about 10 days, 12 days ago, 2 weeks ago, there were 24 lions on Nkuhuma at one stage. So there were a huge number of cats concentrate and then they kind of disperse. And nobody really knows why. I think there's quite a lot of luck involved in that. But yeah, it does happen, especially here in the Sabi Sands. And because there's so much in the way of game drive activity, we are privileged enough to find it as often as we are. So again, lots of questions about could he survive on his own now without the attentions of his mother? Would he be able to do it? Are his chances greater as a male or a female? John and Valerie, you'd also like, those are the sort of themes around which your questions are based. And so let me start by saying that I think Sindile would probably, in the absence of a meeting with a territorial male, be able to survive on his own, were he not to have the attentions of his mother or her hunting skills. Now I say that because I've never seen him thin. I've seen him with various little kills that he's made of his own, franklins and dwarf mongoose and the like. I've seen him chasing various things, and I'm sure he eats quite well on his own. So food-wise, I think you'll find that he would eventually teach himself to take much bigger prey than he's taking at the moment, and I think he'd be okay. Same cannot be said, of course, for if he starts meeting the territorial males. Then, as I said, Scott had an amazing experience at Singita where a young male like this, he's a bit older than this, probably about 4 or 5 months older, did just simply hook up with his mother and her new cubs. And while he didn't take all of the meat, he certainly did feed off some of the kills that she made. Then extending to that, would a male or a female have a better chance of survival? I think there's no question that a female would have a better chance. There are 2 reasons for that. The first is that females normally set up territories next to their mothers. And that means that the females in the area are normally fairly closely related. They do show some kind of kinship recognition, and while they won't sort of live together in a pride and necessarily tolerate each other enormously, they don't show the same level of aggression to each other that the males do. They also are known to go independent earlier than the males. I suppose a little bit like human beings, really, where us men tend to take a little longer to be tossed out of the home than the ladies do. So that's basically in answer to that question. I think he should be okay. Were he a female, would he have a better chance? Yes, probably. I hope that answers your question, John and Valerie. Please remember, when you get hold of us, especially on the tweet, let us know where you're from. We do love to know whereabouts in the world you happen to be watching us here on our little patch of Africa. An interesting question here about when statistically he'd start making a bigger kill, from Teresa in Ohio. Teresa, I don't know for sure. In theory, and I say in theory because this is purely what the books will tell you, he should start accompanying his mother on hunts from about now, and that in theory should help him to learn to take bigger prey. Maybe not necessarily bigger, but certainly faster prey, like a steenbok or a duiker or something like that. Now, whether or not that is going to happen, given his mother's current state, or her potential current state of pregnancy, and then obviously new motherhood, I'm not sure. But leopards are tremendously resilient, and they can kill just about anything, from spiders all the way up to giraffe in some records. So statistically, I suppose, yes, it would be at about 18 months. Right, I think we're just going to go around the corner there and have a look to see if his face is not perhaps a slightly better view. Of course, we did do that, and then he immediately turned around, which was a little bit nasty of him. But I suppose he might be getting a little sick of us watching him. But I'm afraid we're not getting sick of watching. We're not getting sick of watching him at all. So I think we're just going to keep with him for a while. Sindile, you just keep lying exactly the way you are. Now, what I don't want to do, there are a whole lot of logs in front of me, and I don't want to give him a fright, because he's such a confiding young fellow, and he gives us such immense pleasure. All right, Liam. Okay. Well, just to give you a quick update, Brent is still on foot trying to find Karula, and I suspect that he is going to be successful. He is quite tenacious when he gets onto the tracks, so I'm holding thumbs for him. And he's around about exactly where he saw Shadow today, which is unusual, except that Shadow, of course, is mating, so it's not unusual for her to be out of territory. Now, Dennis in Lakeville, Massachusetts, you would like to know if that situation would continue were they to both get pregnant and have cubs. Dennis, no, it's unlikely. It's not unlikely that they'll meet, because their territories do overlap slightly on the western end of Karula's territory and the eastern end of Shadow's territory. We're basically sitting on the border now between the two. But I don't think that they would certainly separate out when they had cubs. Very exhausted young fellow, this magnificent set of chompers. So Dennis, I don't think they're going to spend time together sort of raising their young together like humans might. So I think they'll split up and go their separate ways into their territories. That's not to say that their territories won't shift, which, Dennis, they can do. So Karula might just extend south. I don't know what's going on in the south. Maybe there's a leopard that's moved further south, and so Karula's just spending more time there. She's maybe feeling pressure from Shadow. I'm not sure. Maybe she's trying to escape the Anderson male. So they won't raise them together. They'll definitely separate out. Oh, look at him. Look at him. So, as I was saying earlier, the birth interval for leopards is between, well, the textbooks will tell you, between 17 months and 36 months. And Shadow, of course, is well below the bottom range, or bottom end of that range. And Sai, your question is basically, when do they, if she were to fall pregnant now, when would she come into estrus again? And the answer there is probably, in a normal situation, she would come into estrus at least 14 months after the birth of her new cubs. So if the birthing interval is 17 months, the gestation period is 3 months. The gestation period is 3 months. Sorry, I think I misunderstood your question there, Sai. If she's not impregnated now, when will she come into estrus again? That, I'm afraid, I can't tell you. But to say that she's come into estrus early now, she has had 6 litters before that she's lost, so she's clearly fertile, and I suspect that she would come into estrus quite quickly were she not to fall pregnant in this particular round. And then, so just a little bit, to elaborate a little bit on why Shadow is out of her territory. The females, once they come into estrus, absolutely do seek out males to mate with. And if you watched them mating yesterday, you could be under no illusions as to who was initiating the mating. Now, that's not to say a male won't seek out a female who's in estrus, because she will mark her territory, and if he comes across a marking, he will be able to tell whether she's in estrus or not. But if you watched Tingana and Shadow this morning or yesterday evening, you will see that the mating events, for want of a better term, were just about exclusively initiated by her in a voracious manner. So she would definitely go out of her territory to seek a male. There's another very good reason that they do that, though, and that is to, again, bring up the subject of infanticide. And the more males that she mates with during an estrus period, it would seem that the less the chances of her cubs being killed by a male of the area are, because she manages to confuse paternity. So that's quite an important, I think, what we're starting to think is quite an important part of why they go out of territory to seek males to mate with. An excellent observation of his teeth. You've just seen him yawning there, and I'd forgotten about this, but Arcadia, whose eyes and perceptions are obviously sharper than mine, has noticed that he had double canines for a little while, and that was because his milk teeth were still in his skull, basically, and his big ones were coming through. And Arcadia has correctly noted that his milk teeth are now no longer, they've gone. And so yes, he does seem to have lost his milk teeth. So clearly that happens at around 11 months, which is quite interesting. And also you'll notice as he gets a little bit older, you can see that his eyes are gone from blue to sort of blue-green, and they'll eventually go that yellowy-green color of most of the leopards. Some leopards maintain a bit of blueness in their eyes, and I think Mvula has got a blue eye. Doesn't he have a blue eye, Liam? Do you remember?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? I've definitely seen a male leopard somewhere with a blue eye. So sometimes they do maintain those blue eyes, but that's not obviously going to happen here. Now we're going to just have a look at Sindile. Can we get in on his nose? Is that as much zoom as we've got? There we go. Wilm, most obliging. Thank you so much. Just going to get me binoculars out. Cindy, you want to know how on earth we'd start to distinguish between these leopards? Well, Cindy, the sort of traditional way is to look at the nose, like you are now, and there, just above his whiskers, you can see 3 spots. There are 3 distinct spots there, 2 close together on the right-hand side, and 1 a little bit further away just behind that grass stalk. So on his left-hand side, he's got a spot pattern that is 3, and on his other side, Sindile, I think he's also got 3 spots. Anyway, you can't see them from where we are now. But Cindy, that's the traditional way. There we go. It is 3. So he would be described as a 3-3 male because he's got 3 spots on the left and 3 on the right. Now, many of our ardent watchers of WildEarth will tell you a number of different markings about the various leopards we see. Karula has a I'm just getting out of the way here. Karula has a sort of wow written across the front of her forehead, which is astonishing to see. I didn't see it until it was pointed out to me. So the message for that, Cindy, is that there are any number of ways of doing it because, as the cliche goes,
Hello?
A leopard doesn't what?
Change its spot.
Correct. So if you can find a distinctive pattern in the spotting on his back or on his neck or behind his ears, that will not change. The traditional way, like I say, because it is unique to each leopard, is that spot pattern above the whiskers, and that's the most reliable, unless you see them as often as we do here, in which case they become quite easy to recognize even from color. So Cindy, I hope that answers your question for you. Move a little bit forward. This is why this leopard is so wonderful, because he's a young male. He doesn't necessarily lurk about sleeping all day, like so many of his adult kin. So we get to follow him and watch him doing interesting things. I'm just going to make a bit of a crunch here. No. Okay. We are in quite a thick area. I shall not tell you a lie. So there may be a bit of noise, for which I apologize in advance. Wandering through there. I'm just going to get round here. Glad he's going. We're actually very close to the southern boundary. Oh. And that means that we don't really want him to go south. There he is. When I started guiding, there was no power steering in these vehicles, and so it was an absolute nightmare to try and drive through an area like this. You've got a full body workout, and after a couple of weeks you look like Scott Dyson with that level of musculature. That's a pretty little fellow. Now I'm hoping that he's going to try and catch something little today, perhaps something large. Let's see what he does from here. He nearly caught a scrub hare yesterday evening, and then he nearly caught a kohan. But both times he failed miserably. His propensity to kill little snacks while his mother is hunting has resulted in Pacino John naming him the Franklin Assassin, which I think is quite apt. Oh, what's he got? It was a very serval-like pounce. I don't know what he's smelling or looking for there. We've seen him in this area now for, well, around about here. For 2 days ago he was with his mum, and then for yesterday and today he was here on his own. And Holly, you'd like to know how long he's going to stay in this area and wait for his mum. Holly, I don't know. I think he's going to stay around here until she comes back, within reason. If she never comes back, which I don't think is going to be the case, but because she's in estrus now and she's mating, it could be as long as 4 or 5 days. I think he'll hang around here, to be honest, until she does come back. What is he trying to get? Apparently he was playing with a tortoise shell around this area this morning, so perhaps that's what he's trying to find there. We can try and go around the side there, Liam. Shall we try that? And we're just going to try and get around the side of him. Pretty thick stuff there. Yes. He is behind a stick, I see that, but I don't want to go forward and block his view of whatever he's looking at. It's amazing how agile and graceful his movements are and how fluid. He spotted something. Sorry, the grunting and groaning you can hear is my adopting a particularly uncomfortable position while trying to get my head out of the way of the camera. Yes, there we go. That was my head, in case you were wondering. Don't go that way, Sindile. That is south. Let's just move a little bit. There seem to be about 75 game drives going past us, so I don't think any of them are allowed onto Nkuhuma though. If you will excuse me for 1 second, I don't mean physically, I mean my attention. I'm just going to try and call these people and find out who they are and if they want to come in here. Have a look-see. Station Gari Main Junction, or just west of Junction Triple M. He's chasing. He sort of gave a half-hearted chase of a diker there. Maybe he's probably quite hungry. I can't get hold of anyone on the radio, so we'll just enjoy him on our own for now. And in the background there you can hear my favourite Franklin, called a Cokie Franklin. Alright, so some very exciting news, well, semi-exciting. Firstly, Brent, we're going to go across to Brent now, who unfortunately has been unsuccessful with Karula, and that's because Karula, I think, can fly or sort of transmorgify herself to other parts of the world. It's incredible how she disappears. But he's hot on the trail of some lions, so we're going to go straight across to Brent, and I'll stay with Sindile and see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone. So what we've done is we've left Scott in that area of Karula. I'm really excited to see what's happening with Nkuhuma Pride. And here we have tracks of Junior, and they've left where we left them sleeping this morning. So we're hot on the trail at the moment. So we're going to keep tracking on them, and they're heading directly towards where the rest of the Pride was left. So hopefully we catch up with them on the road before they meet up with the rest of the Pride. Got just the temperature dropped that little bit, so I thought, oh, we better go check on those lions. It might move in this slightly cooler afternoon weather. The tracks are still on Brian's side there. Oh, tracks have gone off. Might have just taken a shortcut through here. They might have even stopped for a nap. So eyes up and open. You know, lions like to stop for naps quite regularly when they're moving. No tracks on the road yet. They might have decided to go through the bush to the west of us here. What is that? What is that I see there? Is that a lion belly or is that a patch of sand? Let's have a look from a bit more open spot. What is that? Let's get the binoculars. You see what I'm looking at there, Brian? I'm not sure what that is. Let's go have a quick look. Rather be safe than sorry. Whether it's a patch of sand or a lion belly, it just doesn't look too much like a piece of sand to me, but we'll find out very shortly. Better view. I think it could just be a pile of sand. And a pile of sand it is. So not a lion belly. But you must always check little things like that. Sometimes they are what you're looking for. My eyes open both sides here. As far as I know from Scott, the rest of the pride were lying up over there. Those tracks were heading in this general direction. I'm hoping, and this is where tracking ahead of an animal sometimes pays off. So even though I'm not following each individual track, I'm jumping up ahead, trying to second guess where the lines are going to come out. So if we get no luck, then we will go back to the last tracks. Scott's just calling me on the radio. Standing by. I'm happy for you to continue checking for Karula. Tracks are just left Zay's right now. I'm just checking if they come out from Rebecca's. So Scotty's going to carry on looking for Karula, who, as I said on the sunrise safari, is possibly, let's check here quickly, one of the most difficult leopards I've ever had to track. She changes direction so regularly, which makes her a very difficult animal to track. But hopefully Scotty's got his lucky underpants on today. We had our lucky underpants on this morning. We're going to keep on these tracks. While we're tracking, we're going to send you back to James and Sindile, and hopefully we'll be back with the reconnected Nkuhuma pride.
Hello, welcome back to Sindile, who is lying gently in the shade as the wind comes up, blowing from the southeast, so I think it's bringing in a bit of a front. Well, you can see that it's quite cloudy You can see that from the light on beautiful Sindile. Instead of shining gold, he's looking sort of dull honey at the moment, and by dull, before I create a storm of protest on Twitter, I don't mean by any stretch that he's anything less than magnificently beautiful. I think he's fast turning into my favorite leopard, actually. Simply because he now really has the odds slightly stacked against him. So, lots of questions we get about snakes, because a lot of people have an enormous fear of snakes. Now this, before I get into the actual question that is going to prompt this discussion, is not unusual. It is an entirely instinctual fear of snakes, and I think it comes from very deep in our evolutionary past, and it's always amazed me. I've never been particularly fearful of snakes any more than other people. I'm definitely very wary of them, and I certainly wouldn't try and handle a snake without some kind of a snake catching implement. I have had to catch cobras and things, but I wouldn't try and catch a mamba without a professional. But Charles has asked, would a leopard like Sindile perhaps try and catch a snake? And the answer is yes. Leopards are known to catch the odd snake, especially pythons. And pythons, while they have very nasty teeth, are not venomous. So while they can inflict a fairly sort of infectious bacterial wound to a human being, the speed at which a leopard can move allows them to get around that, and they will take pythons. I've also seen a leopard, young leopard like this, playing with a mamba. And the mamba, I don't think he killed it, but he certainly would, the mamba would rise up and strike at him, and he'd flick round and swat at it and then dance around and keep going like that. Now a mamba is not slow. A cobra is quite slow, especially in relation to something like a leopard or any cat actually, but with a mamba's not slow at all, but a leopard obviously is tremendously fast. So if he could have killed it without hurting himself, I'm sure he would have, but didn't. So yes, Charles, they will definitely take snakes. Specifically, they will take a python when they can. And while we're discussing this hunting and what he might hunt and what he might not hunt and his various techniques, let's look at his build. He's built for pouncing and stalking. Very short and stocky, not tall and languid like a cheetah, for example. And Acadia, lovely question about whether or not a leopard, and I'm laughing because I was looking for exactly what you're asking just now. You want to know, will a leopard shake its backside, sort of rock from side to side on its hind legs before pouncing like a domestic cat does? Now my mother has a fascination with domestic cats, and she has a cat. My father won't tolerate more than that, so, and I've watched that cat do exactly what you're talking about. Before it pounces, it kind of moves from side to side on its back leg and then leaps. And I was looking for the leopard to do that just when he was about to stalk. I think it was this morning, and he didn't do it. So I don't think they do. I can't remember ever seeing a leopard do that. So perhaps they are not such bottom wigglers before they pounce as house cats are. I'm just going to be quiet for a second. There's a little Franklin alarm calling a little way away from him, and it's coming closer to investigate. Just see if you can hear it. There it is. Now it's coming from some way off. It's a little crested Franklin. You can hear it now going. Pew, pew. He's walking straight towards Sindile now. Straight there. Sindile doesn't seem to have noticed it. There, now Sindile is looking. But the Franklin is alarm calling. The Franklin is alarm calling, but still moving closer to the leopard, which I don't really understand. And it's a very kind of half-hearted alarm. Sindile is just disinterested. So Kachina John, the Franklin assassin, has failed dismally on that score. No, he's flicking his tail now, but he's watching the Franklin, but he doesn't look like he's going to stand up and have a go. No, that Franklin will live another day. Now what's interesting to me, I love watching things like this, because whenever I'm tracking a leopard and you hear a Franklin doing that sort of thing, you immediately go to where the Franklin is and then see if you can't find whether it is immediately around something like a leopard. Now that Franklin started calling about 40 meters away from the leopard, so they've obviously got very good eyes. Well, birds, as we know, do have very good eyes, and started calling from a long way away. So same goes with squirrels. They will start calling from a long way away and long after the leopard's gone under the tree in which they're sitting. So alarm calls, while they're a nice indicator that there is a predator, they're often not great at helping you locate them, because they will call from a long way away. And so if we went straight to that Franklin, had a guess about where Sindile was, and he just ducked off around the corner here, perhaps if he saw us on foot, which is what he would do, then we wouldn't find him, or certainly not as a result of the Franklin. Slightly strange sort of weather coming up at the moment. Like I say, I quite like these afternoons, not too often, but every so often to have a nice grey afternoon with ominous looking clouds. Just gives quite a nice atmosphere, especially as we get into the evening. Isn't that lovely? Gee, that's pretty. Our little snake discussion has sparked a couple of other questions, and you know, the chances of you being bitten by a snake in Africa are smaller than your chances of being struck by lightning. And I don't know how many of you know anyone who's been struck by lightning, but not many, I wager. And I certainly, I know actually one person who's been struck by lightning, but it's a highly improbable event. And we've had a lovely question from Patty about whether it's true or not that the most snake bites are inflicted by people trying to kill snakes, or inflicted on people trying to kill snakes. Patty, it is absolutely true. Snake handlers and people who try and kill snakes when they don't understand snake behavior are certainly at the far greater risk than you or I walking through the bush, or if we see a snake getting away from it. Far greater risk of being bitten. And the reason for that is obvious. A snake will only bite a human being if it feels it has no other option in order to defend itself. It is expensive to produce their venom. They do not see us as prey, and so to bite us, they are basically trying to defend themselves. If you do not threaten the snake, it will 9 times out of 10 leave you completely alone. If you have at it with a broomstick and corner it, then you're going to get yourself into quite a lot of trouble. So this morning we were around here with Sindile. In fact, we left him exactly here with Scott, and not too far from here. In fact, VM, let's try and, can you see that big green tree there in front of us? Not that, the other far one. Does that? So there's a big green tree there. It's a weeping boerbean on a termite mound, and the two lions, Junior and one other, were just the other side of that green tree that VM's showing you now. Now that is roughly, VM, what would you say, about 250 to 300 meters away from us. Sorry, we're just going to whip round onto Sindile, who is now sharpening his little claws. Well, they're not so little anymore. And Lynn, you wanted to know how far away the lions were. Well, they were about 250 meters away, and had they come into this area, they would probably have tried to kill him if they'd found Sindile, but Sindile is not slow, and I suspect he would have disappeared and climbed into a tree very quickly. And while the threat was is a very real one, they are very good at getting away from lions, even as the very young leopards. Excuse me, a bit of a frog in my throat. Sorry, excuse me, I'm just going to turn around. And so we've watched quite a lot of scent marking and in the last little while. Oh, he's actually looks, no, you know what he's doing, lifting his tail like that. There's a bird alarm calling at him, a rattling testicular, and he's just lifting his tail to show that he's no threat. It's quite interesting the way they do that. Alright, I'm going to follow him. While we're doing that, we've been seeing quite a lot of scent marking from Tingana last night, and Shadow wasn't so much scent marking as, well, we don't really want to talk about what Shadow was doing last night. Heidi, you have a lovely question. Is the scent marking that they do intended for other species as well as their own species? So would Karula scent mark in order to, you know, tell hyenas of her presence or lions of her presence and vice versa? Heidi, absolutely not. Leopards want to attract as little attention to themselves as possible, and while I'm pretty sure that the lions and hyenas know what the scent of a leopard is, that's not the intention. The intention is to mark territory against what we call conspecifics, so the same animals of the same species. Lions may well mark their territories in order to kind of frighten off hyenas. That's quite possible, because they don't like hyenas, and they're obviously not afraid of anything, lions. There's a little fellow. Hello, boy. But absolutely not. I mean, leopards want to attract as little attention to themselves as possible from potential competition, and lions and hyenas especially. Very nice question. Thanks, Heidi. A little lovely question all the way from Ohio, from Gracie, aged 8. Gracie, we haven't heard from you from a while, so it's lovely to hear from you again. You want to know if Shadow left Sindile because he was naughty. No, Gracie, I don't think Sindile is naughty at all. He's very playful, but I don't think he's naughty. She left him because she had to go off and meet with his daddy, and not to put too fine a point on it, they're going to perhaps they'll provide him with a little brother or sister, or perhaps even 2 brothers and 2 sisters in the next little while. Thanks, Gracie. So I don't think he's been naughty at all. I think he's just been left to look after himself because he's old enough to look after himself for the next little while. And just an interesting little update I've just heard on the radio is that Quarantine, the uncle of Sindile, the son of Karula, the sister of Shadow, I hope you're writing this all down, has been found on Biffle's Hook in Fine Fettle, and so that's not too far from here. That's north of Juma, and so he's around there. And this leopard's about to pounce on something, or he's certainly thinking about it. His little tail going. And just while we're watching this leopard about to what looks to be try and make a meal of a rattling testicular, which is a ridiculous thing to be trying to do, Brent is getting closer to the Nkuhuma pride. They're definitely still on Juma, and I know he's going to find them, so just bear with us. He will find them, and then hopefully a magnificent sighting on this cool afternoon of the Nkuhuma pride, which has experienced some tragedy in the last little while through the death of one of their lionesses. To the Birmingham Boys, the new male coalition in the area. He's now given up on the rattling testicular and has decided to eat some gwari bush. I love the way his coat twitches with the flies. It is just so, every so often I just have to pinch myself and remind myself what a privilege it is to sit with an animal like this, totally alone, but for VM, who's not very noisy, as you can hear, just observing this magnificent creature for as long as we like. It's just so fantastic. I am going to just tell Aubrey though on the radio. Aubrey, we've also got Shadow's cub on Rebecca's Road Junction, Gari, Main, around there. Brent is trying to track the Nkuhuma pride, hasn't found them yet. There he goes, and you can just probably hear and feel that wind starting to come up, making for a slightly ominous afternoon. Just sneak forward there to make Viam's life a little easier. No, we won't. We'll stay right here. Beautifully his colors match, or they don't match, I guess they blend with this winter vegetation. It's so beautiful. it's almost, I don't want to say ruined, but it's kind of slightly ruined by that greenery. Reduced by the greenery. Right, we're going to go a bit closer and just follow him. Watch heads, Vium. Watch heads, everybody. Duck down. So we talked briefly about kin recognition and how it's done with smell, and Miss Jin and Carol, and one of you is in Dallas, Texas, I can't remember which, is you ask, would the males be able to recognize their kin from smell? Yes, I think they would, you know, and we had a lovely update, I think it was from Ellen yesterday, mentioning that Tingana and Shadow and Sindile have shared kills before. Now, there's no way that Tingana would have tolerated a leopard that wasn't his offspring, or certainly one that he didn't think was his offspring, if he didn't think it was his offspring. So, I think that recognition is probably through scent. It's possible that it's through a memory of mating with the female, in the most unanthropomorphic way. I mean, I don't know how else to describe whether he'd remember it or not. I don't know. I think, though, it's most likely through scent. So, Carol and Miss Jenna, I hope that answers your question. This is where he was when we found him this morning, and he's just been walking around in a sort of oval loop. Oh, he goes running after something. Let's just see what he does. He's found something to chase. Did you see what it was? I'm just going to stop here. I don't want to disturb it if he's found something. Sorry about my head, everybody. The white of his tail there on the bottom right hand side of your screen. I think he's calming down now. Anyway, we're going to stay with him, and I'm going to reposition. Oh, no, he is moving. Let's just stay here for a second. Alright, I think he's just having a bit of a run, to be honest. There we go. Yeah. So, everybody, the reason I'm sounding slightly unsure is that I think it's time to leave Sindile for a little while. We're going to stay with him, but as I predicted, Brent Leo Smith has been successful, and we're going to hand you over to some much larger felines. See you just now.
So welcome back, everyone. We were on the tracks of Junior and the missing lioness, and we've decided that they're going into a really thick block and we couldn't find any tracks of them coming out. So we shot to where Scott last had the Nkuhuma pride, and they're lying up just to the right hand side of me here. And they do look quite hungry. So we are hoping that they might get moving, and we are hoping the other two make it towards this position and come join us here. So they are quite hungry. The weather's turned quite quickly on this sunset safari, and quite a strong wind's picking up. The temperature's dropped, so I'm hoping that they might start moving a little bit earlier. It was quite warm during the day, and I'm sure they were bedded down. You can actually see they were bedded down under these guarri bushes here. You can see how flat the grass is. Brian's going to show you now. See how they flatten the grass under the guarri bushes where they would have been sleeping during the heat of the day. And as it's cooled, they've moved out into the open. Quite a big cloud bank moving in, and it very, very quickly. I mean, when we started the sunset safari, the weather was warm, and Brian's already got his jumper on, and I'm probably going to follow suit very, very, very soon. But there's a very good chance of a reconnection between the missing two Nkuhumas and the rest of the pride. As the crow flies, I'd probably say they're less than a kilometer at the moment from where they are. But whether they did the normal lion thing and then had a little laze, walked a little bit, and then had a little lay down again, can see us starting a little bit of stretching, rolling, hopefully some yawning and some aloe grooming, which will be a signal that they might start be thinking about moving. And the reason they are fragmented at the moment, from what I can hear, is because of the Birmingham boys. They were seen a couple of mornings ago at Nkuhuma to the east of us, and then the Birmingham boys came in, and they obviously splintered and bombshelled and ran to get away from those 5 male lions. And Lisa was just wondering if I've heard any updates from the Birmingham boys. And I have, Lisa. I just actually heard that all 5 of them are on Buffels Hook at the moment, somewhere down in the northeastern sections. You can actually see the wind blowing through the grass there in front of the lions. If we have a look at the guarri bushes around us, you'll see it's actually quite strong. Very gusty, great hunting weather. And if this cloud cover keeps up, it'll be a nice dark night, which is very good for lion hunting. So we're seeing some of the precursor behavior to movement. A little bit of yawning, rolling over, stretching, some heads up at the back there. So we can't really see all the lionesses looking at us at the moment, but a firm favorite, a few of all of ours, I think, at WildEarth, who go out quite regularly, is the amber-eyed lioness. And she has given James what I would call a look of love. Others would call it, and James describes it as a look of terror. But she is, I think, possibly the lioness with her back on the far right. We will stay here for a little bit, and then it is quite a thick area where they are, so I might try reposition to the other side of the line so we can see if we can see the amber-eyed lioness. She definitely wasn't the lioness that was separate with Junior this morning that we found crossing from Arathusa. We can see there is still quite a lot of movement. I mean, we have spent a lot of time with lions, and specifically with this pride, and we've seen them flat beyond flat. I mean, you could not get flatter than that apart from being a pancake, not moving at all for hours. Here we are seeing quite a bit of movement, and it looks like one of the sub-adults up at the back there, heads up. She is quite attentive. They are hungry, so I definitely have my fingers crossed that they're going to move a bit earlier this sunset safari. We're gonna crash cut quickly across to Sindile, and we'll be back with the lions a little later.
Hi everybody, sorry about the crash cut there. Just it looks like little Sindile is crossing south out of our reserve onto a place called Hofmans, which is not very far from where his mum and dad. First, of course, he is going to go to the loo in the middle of the road, which is well, what can we say? I think the less said, the better. Wonderful. Unfortunately, we have already collected this animal's dung, and so I fortunately will not have to go and adhere or put a rubber glove about my hands and collect what he has just deposited there on the road. Again, an indication that Sindile is eating at the moment. He might not go south, but I just thought we'd quickly come back in case he did, because he certainly looks like he might. So basically, the reason that I'm talking about collecting dung with a latex glove is not because that's a sort of fetish of mine. Indeed, that would be quite disturbing if it was. But there is an extensive leopard project in the area by an enormous organization called Panthera, which is does a lot of research on cats and leopards and lions specifically. There we go. Come north, come on, Sindile. And we collecting the dung because while there is an extensive record of the leopards in this area, he spotted something. No DNA work has been done on it. So while we have a pretty good idea, we think, of what's going on with paternity and that sort of thing, he's looking at an impala. He's looking at two impala. See that? You just see the impala on the left-hand side there. So quickly, the dung is collected so that we can do DNA tests. We have collected his dung already, so he's not going to have any more collected just yet. Now, and the only two that I've collected, I think Jamie's collected some, I don't know which ones, but I've collected his and his mum's. So Sindiles and Shadows are in the vials as we speak. Now, I don't think those impala have seen them. I think they would alarm call if they'd seen him. They are, I suspect, well beyond his sort of size in terms of prey. Should we try and sneak up next to him there? But he's definitely stalking them. Look at that. Oh, look. Now he's you see how he's extremely cleverly using that termite mound. See how he's using the termite mound? He stood up behind the termite mound because he knows the impala can't see him from there. Now this is entirely instinctual. And while there is some evidence that leopard mothers teach their young how to do this, you can see that he knows what he's doing. Now the impala, I mean, they're a long way away, but it's wonderful. He's just disappeared into that grass. Isn't that wonderful? Impala are sort of meandering. There's quite a large herd in front of us on both sides of the road. But he won't get anywhere near them, I don't think. Certainly not in this open area. They are so wily. They're not the most numerous antelope out here for nothing. Just kind of gone behind that small active piece of the termite mound there. You can just see a little bit of golden spot. There you go. I'm not going to move. Not because I think he's going to actually make an attempt on an impala, but I don't want to disturb his learning experience. If I go forward, the impala will just sort of drift gently away from him. And if I sit here for long enough, they may come close enough for him to think about having an attempt. I think he'll get himself and bite off more than he can chew, as it were. Not the most easy option for him across an open road like this. So while you're looking at the impala, I am watching the back end of Sindile, where I can see one piece of gold hair and a spot. There he goes. It's moving now. Now a young leopard like this will fail many times at something like this. And it is only through failing hunting attempts like this that he will learn. Especially in the absence of his mother. See him considering his options. Should he, shouldn't he, what should he? Now he's in sort of mid-stalk and looking to me like he's in two minds as to what to do. Should he continue the stalk? Should he press on and do something else? And Charlie, your question about whether or not the leopards learn to catch big animals by instinct, or by learning from their mother, it's a bit of both, Charlie. I think that were his mother to never reappear, I think he'd eventually learn to catch these things as big as impala. But certainly lions do that. Young male lions who go off on their own eventually learn to catch quite big prey on their own. But there is certainly some evidence that their mothers do impart knowledge, certainly on how to throttle something and possibly where to bite smaller prey to kill it quickly. So he'd probably make more mistakes in the absence of his mother, but I do think that he'd eventually learn himself to catch larger prey. It's so instinctual with these cats. The impala have now gone round the back of us, but they've kind of disappeared. Where has he gone? Oh, there he is. The two African hawk eagles just flew across the road. They've disappeared in there somewhere, and there were birds suddenly starting to alarm call all around here, and I think that's what stopped him and made him turn around and come this side of the termite mound. He suddenly looked up and started looking for what was alarm calling. So what started off as a fairly bright afternoon has turned into a fairly ominous evening. And there was a chilly wind when I went for a walk at about 12 o'clock this afternoon. And I think that's brought in a bit of a front. Now, the importance of that to right now, other than the way it makes things look, of course, I'm just going to move in there a bit, is that it allows him a little bit more leeway with his hunting. Because of the wind and because of the lack of light, and certainly there won't be any moonlight or starlight tonight if these clouds persist, it will make hunting for him that much easier. The wind will mask his noise and his smell, if he has a smell, and the clouds will obviously obscure the light for the more diurnal seeing antelope. Is that all right, Jan? Please excuse the telegraph pole in the background, but I'm afraid naught can be done about it. Even in the wilderness we have to communicate with each other. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to us or watching us. He's lying in amongst a grass species which in summer is very pretty. It's quite pretty in winter too, called Chloris roxburgiana. It's a wonderful name. He's lying amongst the swaying culms of golden chloris. Sounds like a book title, don't you think, Viam?
Yes, it is.
The swaying culms of chloris. Possibly not a book I'd read. I think that as the afternoon progresses, he's going to move around a bit more, see if he can find something to eat, and play a bit. I mean, a lot of what he's doing now, I think, is play behavior that often would be done with a sibling, but he doesn't have any siblings, well, yet, and so he must play on his own. And Gracie, I don't know if you're still watching or not, but yesterday he was playing with a stick, and I remember you asked me once whether the elephants have toys to play with, where the young animals have toys to play with. And I said to you that they make their own toys, and that's exactly what he was doing yesterday, Gracie. He was playing with a stick. John and Charlie just commenting on, I'm smiling because a vehicle just drove past and didn't see the leopard, so they looked at us, but not at this magnificent beast sitting on the termite mound just next to us. John and Charlie, you say well done for him trying those Impala. Certainly it was an ambitious attempt, and Charlie, you say maybe he would have had a better chance had there been a dwarf mongoose. Yes, absolutely. Or perhaps a francolin. It always astounds me, so often we drive into a sighting, or people come into a sighting, and they see the camera on the back of the vehicle, and they don't even look at the animal. It can be wild dogs killing an elephant, and the first thing that they will look at is the vehicle and the camera on the back of it. And so that's all that those people saw when they drove past young Sindile sitting here in plain view. Right, so from a singular solitary cat, we're going to head across to a pride of them who seem to be in this cool weather getting a little bit more active than they were before. So I'm going to hand you over to Brent, and I'll see you in a little while.
Oh, she's coming in. Welcome back, everyone. Unfortunate for young Sindile there. And here we go. It's a definite bit of aloe grooming starting, and a bit of licking and whatnot, lying on top of each other. Very, very common lion behavior before they set out to start moving. So we're really hoping that Junior and the other lioness pop in to visit quite shortly. Unfortunately, the strong wind could make it a little bit difficult for them. Very much a gusty wind. So Scott is off trying to find Junior and the missing lioness, and we're going to stand by here in case they just arrive. And Paula, who's just tuned in, was wondering why Junior and one of the lionesses is not with the rest of the pride. So they were to the east of us a few days ago, and I think the Birmingham males who arrived in that area not too long ago might have scattered them, and so Junior and another lioness would have run off, and these five would have run off in a different direction to save themselves. So they'll now be looking to reconnect, and we found Junior and that other lioness crossing from Arathusa this morning into Djuma, and Scott found these five members of the Nkuhumas. And they're about 1.5 kilometers away from the last tracks that we saw of Junior and the other lioness. So hopefully they do reconnect while we're with them. There you go, a bit of playing starting, another good sign that there might be some movement shortly. there's a female playing with one of the sub-adults. Oh, not quite ready for moving yet. So obviously it seems like a bit of a needle in the haystack to be able to find each other in this vast African wilderness. And Tyler, who's 12 years old, is wondering, apart from calling and roaring to each other, how else are they going to find each other? Well, Tyler, the reason they wouldn't roar at each other at the moment is because of the Birmingham boys, and they do not want to give away their presence to those 5 males, which could probably lead into a serious altercation between them and those 5 males. And Tyler, your question ties in with Charlie's question, and Charlie's wondering, with this strong wind, would they not be able to smell a junior and the other lioness? Well, that is one of the ways they would reconnect, was from smell. They will use contact calls, very low, soft contact calls that can't be heard from a long distance, and those sort of sound like this. Ow, ow. And they would use that, and that's not going to be heard from a long distance like a roar. And obviously smell would then also play a very important role. Charlie, to your question, unfortunately this wind is very gusting, and it changes directions quite often, so it might be a bit difficult for them to use the wind itself to track Junior and the other lioness. It's blowing in all directions at the moment. They might get a whiff, but it wouldn't be strong enough for them to get a dedicated position. I'm quite sure the reason Junior and Co are heading this way is because they might have heard this morning these guys chasing buffalo. So Scott saw a stampeding herd of buffalo, and then shortly afterwards found the lions. So I think they might have heard that interaction and what's leading them in this general direction. So hearing, and it might not be what you consider like a roar or a call, it might be something like a herd of buffalo being chased that might lead them in the direction. Obviously that could be a bit of a risk, especially with how the Birmingham boys are prominent buffalo hunters. But it is one of those fascinating things about wildlife. And we're not 100% sure about everything, and we learn something new every day. So thanks a lot for those questions, guys. Oh, it's getting nippy. I'm just going to pop my jersey on quickly. And there we see the amber-eyed lioness is lying in the middle of those 3 there. There she is. And you can see those beautiful eyes of hers. So she's the one who's initiated the grooming and whatnot this evening, and she got up and started flopping on the other lions. Sorry guys, the guys are just trying to get hold of me to find out exactly where the lions are. Oh, they yawn. I'm just going to be on the Game Drive radio for a skosh, and I'll be back with you. As soon as someone else arrives here, I'm going to hand over the control of that sighting to that Game Drive vehicle so you guys can have my undivided attention. If I'm currently with Nkuhumas. Ephraim. I'm currently with 5 members of the Nkuhuma Pride. Best access is off Rebecca's Road, or what's called Finn's Road, along that sort of open seep line where we had the matimbas and sticks with Montana a while ago. And there's a large dead knob thorn that's quite visible, but if you drive in on that 2-track, I'll guide you in from there. Ephraim, I think so. I wasn't with him this morning, but I think this is the same place. And if we have a look on her back there, we can see a definite scar from fighting. And that could very possibly be from a run-in with the Birmingham boys. You can see there's quite a few scars now on the back, and I don't remember seeing them that prominently on the Nkuhumas before. It could also just as easily be a big scratch from a hunt or from one of the other members of the Pride, but I think more than likely, with the amount of interaction they've been having with the Birmingham boys recently, that is probably the cause of that. But you can see it's healed quite quickly. Oh, look, ears are up. I've just heard a Franklin alarm call in that direction where she was looking, and hopefully it might be Junior and the missing lioness. So we're going to have a quick look at the other lionesses and see if we can see any prominent scars on them that are quite new. I did see some on the other lioness that is with Junior that we saw this morning. They didn't look as bad as this, but I can't really see any scars on the others at the way they're lying. From what I have been told by the guides who operate to the east of us, that they did put up quite a good fight at one point against the Birminghams before deciding discretion was the better part of valor and disappearing. So it's more than likely that those scars, and you can see the ones right on the end of her rump almost look like a bite mark rather than a scratch mark, where there's the bigger scars up higher do look like a scratch mark. You can see there's a fly on them as well, and she's trying to bend around to lick on them. And you'll notice, like our domestic animals, they do that, and you can see there's one a little bit lower that's still quite raw, and that's the one the fly was lying in, obviously irritating her slightly. Oh, and we have a low-flying aeroplane, so if you wonder what that noise is, it's delivering guests, and the lions are looking at it as it goes over. And there it goes, delivering people on safari. Well guys, just some news from Scott on the radio, so I'll be with you in 2 ticks. Well done, Scotty. Scotty, what is the estimated distance between the position of the 5 and those 2? Okay, so some really interesting news from Scott there, guys. The missing 2 Nkuhumas are probably about 700 meters to 800 meters away from where we're sitting now, in that direction, so in a sort of southeasterly direction, and we're really hoping that they're going to come towards us here. So I think we're in the best position now. Scott will keep me updated as they move, so I think we're just going to sit tight here, and hopefully we'll be able to watch a reconnection with the Pride. Oh, that was a one problem about sitting downwind of lions sometimes, if you could see Brian's face, you would understand. Lions are quite flatulent animals, and with their diet of red meat and internal organs, they can be quite smelly from time to time. So we've been very fortunate that we were able to watch the Nkuhuma pride in its entirety stalk and hunt and catch a buffalo right next to us. And Dennis from Massachusetts, welcome Dennis, is wondering, would these 5 lionesses attempt to take on a buffalo without the aid of a young male like Junior, or would they just completely stay away from them? Well, the Nkuhumas are sort of buffalo specialists, and I have no doubt that these 5 would definitely go for a buffalo without the young male present. It would be a little bit more difficult. He is that much physically bigger than them already, and he does add that extra weight and strength, but I'm quite sure that these lionesses would be quite capable. The 2 young sub-adults, as we saw in the last kill, sometimes it's sort of more of a nuisance, but that can also be a help because it distracts the buffalo. But I think these 3 adult lionesses would definitely be able to take down a buffalo. And you must remember, specifically at this time of the year, you will notice that lions definitely have a much higher intake of buffalo meat, and they do hunt buffalo far more regularly. And that is because it is the dry season, and the buffalo do have to move much bigger distances between the water and feeding, and also the quality of the grass that they're feeding on in the dry season is nowhere near as nutrient rich as the wet season. So it does make the buffalo a little bit weaker and slightly easier targets for lions. Oh, and you just saw her lift her head there as a fork-tailed drongo bombed past, and he's landed just behind us. But back to the lions and the buffalo. So in the wet season, when there's been a lot of green grass, the buffalo have a far higher intake of rich food, and are therefore much healthier and are able to defend themselves better. So this is sort of definite buffalo season for the lions. Not to say that they wouldn't hunt buffalo in the wet season, they just have a much higher success rate in the dry season. So on that drongo that just bombed past and is now sitting behind Brian, Fulyon from our capital city, Pretoria, welcome Ech, is wondering why the drongo is hanging around the lions. Well, it's unfortunately not hanging around the lions, it's hanging around us. So we often see drongos in sightings around the bigger herds of animals, and even the smaller herds of animals. And as those animals move through the bush, the disturbed insects, the drongo will jump up and grab, and they do the same with our safari vehicles. They're incredibly intelligent little birds, so as we drive through the bush and we disturb grasshoppers and other insects, the drongo is right there to take advantage of. Just because we're stationary at the moment, the drongo is just checking what else is around, and he obviously saw something near the lions. Brian's going to try flip around because he's literally hovering like a vulture over our shoulder, waiting for us to move the safari vehicle again and take advantage of the possibility of insects jumping up as we drive through the grass. Incredible little birds and unbelievable opportunists. We'll find them with Impala. Whoop, and off he disappeared. He spotted something else. Where'd he go?
There he is there.
There he is there. He obviously spotted something else. So even while he's waiting for us to move, he will be keeping his hawk eyes out for any insects that might move. And obviously at this time of the year it's a bit more difficult for a drongo. During our winter months and our dry season, there are less insects around. So he's got to take any chance he can get to get a good meal. And also the lions pose no real threat to the drongo, and even if they did get up and start moving or start playing, he would definitely take advantage, or she would take advantage of any insects disturbed by the lions in their movements or their play. I'm just going to ask Scotty if there's an update on those other two quickly to see if they're moving. Scott. Are those animals mobile or stationary? Copy, thanks. So just there we go, quick update from Scotty. So they're about 700 meters away from us, Junior and another of the lionesses. They are busy grooming and stretching at the moment, so hopefully they'll be on the move shortly towards us. Guys, we're going to cross quickly across to James and Sindile. He's on the move, and we'll be back a little later.
Hello everybody, sorry to drag you away from the Leons, but I don't believe they're doing anything particularly entertaining. Sindile is running at high speed, there's something like a cheetah over there. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing roughly 30 kilometers an hour. There, he stopped. He's heard, seen or smelt something here. Or he was just getting cold and wanted a bit of a run. I'm just going to get a little bit around the side of him, so that should he launch off again, we have a bit of a head start. Is that right, Jim? He's just right next to his favorite termite mound again. I don't know what he saw in here, or what he thought he was going to catch running through the open at that speed. There he goes again. I can't hear anything else. I can't see anything. It looks like he's listening and smelling, but the wind's blowing from behind him, so I don't think he's smelling anything. We'll just trail him a little bit at a distance in case there is something that he's seen. Maybe he heard his mum. He seems to be listening. Look at him. Isn't he wonderful? Now he's heard something here. So I'm not going to start the engine for the next little while until he moves. A little bit around the front of him, switch off. I'm not going to to get close to him now, so the picture's not going to be wonderful. But we'll wait for him to emerge from where he is now. Liam, can you even get anything in there? So he's looking off to the front of the car, or towards the sort of, yeah, bright left. Oh, you know what he's seen? It's a kudu. I can see a kudu in front of us. What he thinks he's going to do with a kudu at his size, I can't imagine. Kudu is sitting on a termite mound just in front of us, roughly 4 times his size. But you can see he's very clearly keen to hunt something. He's feeling a bit peckish. There's the kudu over there. Totally oblivious. But now he finds himself in a similar position to the one he did earlier when he spotted the impala and sort of got close and then didn't really know what to do. And that's, now he's looking embarrassed. He's looking embarrassed by the fact that he's dragged us here and now doesn't know what to do. At least, as has been pointed out to me, he is ambitious. Well, he certainly can't be faulted on that front. I'll just tell you what we can hear around us at the moment, other than you're probably picking up bits and pieces of the wind. I can hear a Cape turtle dove or ringneck dove calling. A green pigeon just went bloop, 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 bloop. But on a windy day like this, the birds tend to go fairly silent, and all you can hear is the rustling of the southeast breeze as it moves through the dry twigs and the last leaves. It's a drongo trying to imitate a pearl-spotted owl and doing a poor job. So he was running along the road there, and then he stopped and he looked and he sort of listened very carefully, and then he ran a bit more, and I thought to myself, maybe he's heard Shadow calling him. It's still possible that that's what he did here, but I don't think so anymore. And Karen, you want to know, left alone like this, would he ever perhaps try and call her? Karen, I don't think so, no. I think he would wait in this area for her to come back and get him. He's got no idea where she is, you see, and so I don't think he'd start calling her. He's now starting to stalk again, so we'll just go over to him and see what happens if and when that kudu... Oh no, he's laying down. So Karen, I don't think he would ever call for her. Remember, his major purpose at the moment is to avoid being spotted by anything. very interesting question from Shamrock. Shamrock, I'll try and give the introduction that you gave. The radio did break while I was doing it, but this is what I think you're asking. You say that initially, certainly, you know, let's take it back to the days of Pavlov and his dog. We thought of animals as kind of automatons that basically functioned entirely according to their instincts, where they lived entirely trying to eat, you know, procreate, and sort of get by that way without emotion. And then as we've started to study and observe them more, so we've picked up more nuance in their behavior and perhaps forms of emotion. And you want to know basically where is the line between anthropomorphizing and, you know, where do we draw the line with our interpretation of their behavior and anthropomorphizing. So where does ethology begin, the study of animal behavior, and where does anthropomorphizing begin? I don't think there is a line, Shamrock, and I think the more that we study animals like this, so that line will become more and more blurred. Anyone who's ever owned a dog or a cat or a horse knows that they're not mindless automatons who are functioning purely according to their instincts. They definitely do feel some kind of emotion. Now, to anthropomorphize would be to try and impress a human emotion onto that. But to try and interpret it from a purely scientific point of view, when we're unable to communicate with them on any serious level, I think is equally as I'm not going to say wrong, but it's equally as uninformative, if you like, and equally as misleading to do either. So a very nice question. And with an animal like this, what stimulated your question was the fact that I said that he looked embarrassed. I don't think he looked, I mean, I don't know if he was feeling any embarrassment. I don't think he was. Who knows? Maybe he was. But you know, you get a look on an animal's face and you think, well, you know, we put a human emotion onto it. And our faces, of course, are extremely expressive, the most expressive faces in the animal kingdom. And we take all of our cues about feeling and about how other people are interpreting us mainly from the face, from the way, I mean, you can see the way I'm moving my eyes now is indicating some kind of emotional engagement. You can see when I'm smiling, you can see when I'm disengaged and I'm a bit bored. That comes entirely from my face and my body language. He is up now. So I'll get back to that. He's stalking a kudu 4 times his size. You go, boy. Don't get hurt. I think this is more play behavior, to be honest. But this, just like the questions we were having, is how he is going to learn to do this. He's going to fail many times, but he will learn to hunt by doing precisely what he's doing now. Sneak a little bit forward, we are. see what he tries to do now. I can also hear a lesser striped swallow, which you won't be able to hear through your microphone, but that's quite a nice sound because it means that spring is on the way.
It looks like it.
Looks like?
It looks like spring is on the way.
It doesn't look like it. So as we talk about spring, and Viam gives me his Eeyore version of whether he thinks spring is coming or not. Pamela, you want to know when the trees will sprout. Well, Pamela, the knobthorns will start their flowers very soon, and then they will sprout their leaves, and the leopard is on the move, and then the rest will come fairly soon after that. So Pamela, in about 2 or 3 weeks, you'll notice a huge change in the leaves, but not the grass. What's he doing? Go on. That's it. They've got no idea he's there. They bark at him. They've got a loud alarm bark. So Pamela, the grass won't change colour until there's rain, but the leaves will sprout with day length change, and that will be very soon. So a very nice comment from Lady Macbeth. I assume not the original out-damned Spot, Lady Macbeth. You say a house cat will show displacement behavior when it misses a jump or something like that, and why would a big cat not do that? There's no reason at all. They may well do that. I'm just not convinced that I'm able to interpret it. So I think we do misinterpret a lot of what we see. And we probably, sometimes we think it's emotion, sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it might be. But it's a really lovely conversation to have. And Shamrock and Lady Macbeth, I'm so glad you've made these comments, because I certainly, before I came to the bush, after a standard science degree, felt that there was a definite line. That animals didn't feel emotions, and that we shouldn't be anthropomorphizing them, and that there was a certain set of criteria that came from textbooks, and that's how animals behave. And of course, after the umpteenth time I'd received egg on my face, I realized that this simply isn't true. And these animals unquestionably feel emotions. It's interpreting them, I think, that's the real trick. And especially in terms of communication, in terms of mourning, and there is a point at which you have to be careful, though, because we as human beings naturally try to, and we get it with our questions so often, and I've mentioned questions about fathers and whether they are good fathers or bad fathers, and what's so interesting is that you just got to be careful not to impress human emotions onto them and try and interpret them from a human way, and to try and do it independently of that, and that's obviously almost impossible. Another little comment from Shamrock. It's my pleasure to answer your question, Shamrock, and if they're going to always be that good, please keep sending them through. You say you're watching at work. because I've suggested that that's a good idea. Well, good for you. I'm glad. I hope it's helping you through the work day, although I don't really think you should be at work on a Saturday, should you? And as Shamrock is finding his work more entertaining by having this running in the background, the sighting of Sindile in the African wilderness, so I encourage all of you, when you happen to be finding yourselves perhaps on a commute to or from work, or perhaps that's when my sister watches, she's in London, or perhaps when you're on a boring meeting and somebody's waffling on about nothing, you can have this going on a mobile device. It's an excellent way to pass the time and remove yourself into a magnificent, magnificent wilderness where I am privileged to call this home. So the kudu have moved off sort of to the right hand side of your screen now, and I think he's lost a bit of interest in them. I'm just going to move a little bit around him and see if we can't get a slightly better view of his face. Sorry about that, everybody. We seem to have lost some signal, and we're in a good signal area, and I think it's probably entirely to do with a change in air pressure from this front that seems to be coming through. Or doesn't seem to be coming through at all. It is coming through, I can see it. Sindile is still observing the hind end of a kudu with something approaching relish on his lips. And while he's lying there, I'm just going to continue that interesting discussion from Shamrock about animal behavior and anthropomorphizing and putting emotions on animals. And the most obvious example out here is elephants, where elephants very clearly mourn their dead. They very clearly celebrate birth. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to see them celebrate a birth, and very sad. It can be extremely emotionally draining to watch them mourn a death. And while we're talking about the elephants, Dennis has just reminded us of a sighting that Jamie had the other day, where there was an elephant mother and 3 calves. One of them was bullying the other, and the little one seemed to communicate something to his mother, and she then turned around and gave the others a jolly good hiding. And yeah, Dennis, fascinating. I mean, wonderful to see things like that. Again, with elephants, their communication, I think, is so sophisticated that we're only scratching the surface of vaguely understanding how they speak to each other, let alone what they say to each other. I think it's an extremely complicated thing, and certainly with elephants, their emotions are much more obvious. But just remember, while we talk about emotions and that sort of thing, and I was talking about facial expressions, cats and dogs, in fact just about all animals out here, have only one way, or very few ways, of showing emotion on the face. One, of course, is to move the ears. So I don't know if any of you have ridden horses before, or I mean, you've all had cats. When a cat puts its ears back, it means that it's angry. It's going to attack something. When it puts it forward, sometimes just having a listen, but generally when they're relaxed, you can see when they're relaxed. Obviously, lifting the lips to growl is an indicator of some kind of malice and anger, but that's all they've got. And that tends to be what we look for when we look for emotion in animals. And I'm sure that they feel a lot more than we can actually see, because they don't have the facial musculature that we do, that allows us to communicate so effectively simply with looks and with facial expressions. And obviously that gets more complicated the more towards us you get. So the primates are much more expressive facially. And then a lovely comment from Jim in Georgia. I mean, I think we could probably sit here for hours and discuss this. But Jim, you say animals are good at reading human emotions. Absolutely they are. But how? We don't know how. They can certainly read body language. So they can read some kind of fear. But are they reading that from our body language, or is it some kind of sixth sense? Now, some people will look at me as though I'm stark raving insane. Viam is not, thankfully, looking at me as though I'm stark raving insane. But I think that there are elements of, one hesitates to use the term, but extrasensory perception where with animal communication. How do lions communicate with each other when they hunt? How do swallows and, not swallows, starlings and quailias fly in flocks of millions of birds and not have one crash? How is that possible? It's not possible on any level that we truly understand. There are thousands of postulations from scientists who try and prove this and that. None of them make a great deal of sense when you truly get down to how it is that they manage to communicate the way they do. Absolutely, they can pick up on human emotions. How they do it, I'm not sure. I think that they pick up, again, elephants is a lovely example. I know people who are charged by elephants almost on sight, by default. Lovely people, but it's something about them that the elephants pick up. And others who've never been charged by elephants. It's just something that the elephants are picking up, and I'm going to use the term, in the energy of the person. And I think the more that we understand that stuff, and the more we understand the kind of again, I'm going to get into slightly controversial territory here, but you know, 10 years ago, if you spoke about the aura that somebody had, most people would look at you as though you were stark raving insane. These days, we can actually photograph them in some cases, and so we are giving off a vibe of some kind. And this is hard for me to say because I'm trained as a scientist, so it's I'm not coming from this from a purely emotional point of view, but there is something that we are giving off that helps animals to communicate with us, absolutely without question. And I can tell when I come into an area like this, if I'm angry, animals know immediately, and it's an amazing thing that we really don't understand. Sindile is still watching his kudu. Oh, there's a Quran again. Now, for those of you who weren't on drive yesterday, Sindile made an absolute hash of chasing a red-crested Quran. And I can see one a long way away. I don't know that you'll pick it up on the camera. When can you see it?
Saw one.
It's when they're running, nipping through the bush there. That Sindile may try and get hold of. Yes, it was round about where Viam's pointing the camera now. It was minding its own business, knocking about, probably looking for a lady. They've just started calling the red-crested Kohans, and that's because they are thinking about trying to breed, as are many of the birds now starting to think about that. I think that the young Sindile will probably try and eat something tonight. Well, I think he'd probably, like most young teenagers, will try and eat something all the time. But I hope that he succeeds tonight, because his mum is busy and will probably be busy for the next 2 or 3 days. What's he spotted now? He's looking towards his favourite termite mound. As a last comment on the anthropomorphizing and interpretation of animal behavior and whether animals can get cross with us or not, Jennifer from Toronto says that her cat, when displeased with her, will pee on her pillow. Well, Jennifer, that was my cat. It would be an outside cat. We're going to go across to Brent and see how he's doing with the Nkuhuma Pride. On that note, I hope they haven't peed on anyone's pillows, and we'll see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, we're still with the sleepy Nkuhuma Pride. I did think they might move a little bit earlier when they started stretching. There is still a little bit of aloe grooming and stretching going on. For those of you who are not sure what aloe grooming is, well, they've now gone fast asleep while aloe grooming. It's when different members of the pride will lick and groom each other. And what this is there to do is to strengthen bonds within the pride, because when they feed, they forget all who's friends and who's not, absolutely go to town on each other to get the best pieces of meat. So update on Junior and the other missing lioness. They are still about 700 meters away, and thus Scott is with them. They are fast asleep like these ones. Apparently no sign of movement just yet. Isn't that cute? So if we look up the makeup of this pride at the moment, there are currently with us 3 adult lionesses, 2 sub-adults, and there's a missing lioness and another young male of about 3.5 years old. And Paula was wondering, why doesn't this pride have cubs? Well, Paula, they haven't been mating with any males, so the females haven't come into that estrus cycle, and now would be a very bad time for them to have cubs, as the Birmingham males are busy taking over this territory from the Matimba males. And the Birmingham males recently killed one of the adult lionesses from this pride. So at the moment, be a very bad time for them to have for them to have cubs. But lions' breeding cycles are completely based on estrogen cycles, or coming into heat, as we would call it with domestic animals. So the females will only mate and then can only have cubs when their body comes into that cycle. And that can vary from individual lions, and it can also vary on individual years depending on external factors, sort of amount of food availability. Also now with pride takeovers, all this type of stuff, it can vary, but they do not have a choice about when it comes into being. It's a completely natural thing, like the ovulation process in humans. And we'll show you now. So what we have, one adult lioness to the right there who just yawned. There's a sub-adult lying next to it. That's the sub-adult there. And if we carry on left a little, that's Amber Eyes closest to us there, another adult lioness. And then above her to the right, that's another adult lioness. And then lastly on the left is another one of the sub-adults. The sub-adults are probably approaching close on 2 years now, probably a year and 8 months. And once they get over that sort of 2-year mark, there is a possibility that the Birmingham males won't kill them. While they're under that 2-year mark and not sexually reproductive, they are at threat currently with a pride takeover in place, they are definitely a threat from those 5 Birmingham boys. So the weather has changed dramatically since we've been out on safari, the sunset safari. We started in bright sunlight and now we are under a very grey, cloudy sky with strong gusting winds, and that's a good prospect for the lions hunting. It'll cause a dark night and the prey species are not going to be able to detect the smell that well, and it will also, the gusting wind will hide a lot of the noises the lions make as they move through the bush. So it is a good night for them to hunt. We are hoping that they rejoin with the other 2 missing lions, and hopefully that'll happen before the end of safari. Unfortunately, I think my gut tells me it's going to happen probably after dark and after the end of the sunset safari, but whoever's out in the morning will definitely be following up on that. This is the pride we do spend the most amount of time with, so obviously we're really fascinated about the ongoings of the Nkuhumas, and they very sadly lost an adult lioness, as I said earlier, to the Birmingham boys. But in no means does that mean this pride is in big trouble yet. It all depends on how the pride takeover comes into being, and hopefully the Birminghams sort of establish themselves and stop killing off lionesses. So this is definitely not a night as a human being you want to be wandering around the savannah. Very interesting relationship human beings have with lions, and we are the dominant diurnal predator, have been for about between the last 150,000 to 200,000 years, and lions have evolved to the dominant nocturnal predator. And lions, during the day, when we walk into them while we're tracking in that, 99.99% of the time they're actually going to run away. There is always that 0.1% something could go wrong, or you could get charged. And even when you get charged, depending on your behavior from that charge is how the lions will react. So if you stand your ground and shout and throw some stones at them, they will generally then stop the charge and move off. Come darkness, we forego all our sort of powers, and we know instinctively that the lion is boss at night. The lion is a far different animal at night towards humans as it is during the day. They know that they're the dominant at night, and they will actively hunt humans at night, whereas in the day they'll move away. And obviously evolutionary, we couldn't have 2 dominant predators fighting for the same sort of time period to be active in. So lions have got the night and we've got the day. And that funny little feeling as you get towards the end of the day and it starts to get dark and you've left work and you want to go home, that's actually an instinctive response to when we used to live on the African savannas, that we need to get home before these guys get out and start hunting. And especially on a dark night like tonight, we will be able to see absolutely zero, and the lions will be able to see us as if we were almost in bright daylight. they keep teasing me with a bit of stretching, a bit of licking, keep making me think they're going to get up. But as a lot of our viewers who spend a lot of time on the live safaris with me will know, one of my favorite little quips is that the most important weapon in your safari arsenal to see the most incredible sightings is patience. And it has worked so well for me over my many years in the bush, so I don't mind sitting quietly with the lions waiting for them to do something. I couldn't think of anywhere else I'd rather be right now, to be completely honest. So while we stay here with the Nkuhumas, patiently waiting, we're going to go across to a different form of patience, or we could call it impatience, with Sindile and his practice hunts.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the eerie clouds. They're not quite scudding, but they're gently floating out over the low veld and towards the mountains, where I don't think they're going to drop any moisture on us, I'm afraid. Sindile is where you last left him. The kudu are off to our, well, sort of behind your screen if you like, and Viam and I are in precisely the same position we were. But you can see as the light drops, certainly the ambient light, although your picture is still quite bright, his sort of camouflage is now coming into its own. I believe Brent was just saying to you that you have to be patient with cats. Absolutely, you have to be patient with cats. Likewise, they have to be patient too when they're trying to hunt. And Joanne and many others have commented on Sindile's attempts and how he's been very probably impatient with some of his attempts, which have resulted in failures. And Joanne, you've said that surely all of these will contribute to his eventual ability to take down much larger prey. Absolutely. It's exactly what's happening here. This play behavior, it's only semi-hunting behavior. If he got something, he'd certainly try and eat it. But a lot of it is playful behavior that he would normally engage in with a sibling, for example. But he's doing it on his own, and every time something comes within strike distance, he'll definitely have a go at it. So the temperature has dropped. It was a very fine 28 degrees when we started off the game drive, or 82 degrees Fahrenheit, and I think it's probably now down about 80. Well, I'm getting a report that it's 25 degrees. This is the coldest 25 degrees I've ever experienced in my life. The weather service is telling a foul and contemptible lie. Indeed, I have wrapped myself in what can only be described as a dog blanket, and I am presently trying to warm myself and quite looking forward to getting to a fire later on. 25 degrees my left foot. I think it's probably about 16, which for us is very cold out here.
And it's dropping.
And it's dropping. Viam is actually about to zip up his jersey, and he's even colder, of course, because he's failed to bring himself a snack. Normally he comes with an array of junk food to see him through the 3 hours, but he's looking hungry and cold at the moment.
It's because we only have green peppers and bananas are finished.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And so Sindile, of course, with his beautiful pelage, is not cold at all. And we've discussed a little bit about Sindile's eventual independence as he nods off to sleep. He really is feeling quite soporific, I can see. And we've discussed also how the males tend to spend a lot longer with their mothers than the females. And Patty in Washington, you want to know why that is. And I don't know exactly, but to say that I think it's probably got to do with the fact that the males will have to set up a territory often away from their natal territories. So when they go independent, they're under immediate threat from territorial males who will try and oust them, and if they get hold of them, kill them. Whereas the females tend to set up territories next to their mothers. And so they have almost a support network. It's not quite like that, but it does feel almost like a support network that the females have. And because they set up territories next to related females, the chances of actual physical aggression from local territorial females is that much less. So I think, Patty, that is why you'll find that the males spend longer with their mothers than the females. And I'm gonna toss this out, and you can comment on it as you will. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Let's look at human beings. We were talking about anthropomorphizing things and animal behavior. I think you find quite often, well, you can tell me if this is in your experience or not, but with human beings, women will often move away from home more comfortably than men, actually. And this is certainly in many traditional societies, because of the support network of other women. Whereas men who don't have that level of kind of support network around a new home tend to spend a bit longer close, or a bit longer next to the natal home. Maybe it's a similar sort of situation. I may be talking absolute nonsense, but it's a thought that popped into my head, because what isn't nonsense is that human beings, certainly in traditional societies, women tend to leave home before men, and some men never leave home. They will always stay around where they were born. Little Sindile has woken up. And you've been watching those lions. I mean, they've been doing a bit of grooming and then passing out and falling asleep and lying about doing nothing. And a leopard like this will never sleep like that. And I've mentioned this again and again, but it is very interesting to me. They cannot afford to sleep with that level of asleepness. I'm not sure that's a word, but they can't afford to be that dead to the world, because they're just that much more threatened. He's such a sweet little fellow, this. I think that if he came and sat in this car, I think we'd both be a lot warmer. Don't you, Viam?
Mm-hmm.
That would be quite nice.
If he's anything as warm as a house cat.
Viam has a house cat, everybody. Not with us here, of course. It lives in Cape Town. looks after his home for him. And cats like this, so a lion will sleep for about 20 hours of the day, and Sindile probably, I think probably quite a lot less than that. And the adults, probably, I'd say about 18 years. Just quickly chat to Scott. He 18 hours a day, but fitfully. They don't sleep with complete sort of calm like the lions. Sorry, Scott, can you go again? He's just with some lions, the other two lions. Copy that, that's fine. Scott was with two of the other Nkuhuma lions, who are flat on their backs, doing absolutely nothing. I'm sure they will join up later tonight, but probably not for the next little while. And you can see, again, I was just saying how as the light fades, you can see how his pelage is ideally suited to this kind of dim crepuscular light. Now he blends in with the fallen leaves around him, all but for the white bits on his belly. It's also interesting how much less obvious he is with his eyes shut. And see what else we can hear at the moment as this theoretically 25-degree evening starts to fade. A couple of drongos trying to be pearl-spotted owls. That's about it, really. And just this slightly eerie wind. Right, well, I'm not going to go anywhere. We don't have too much longer to go on this marvelous drive. So we're going to head back to Brent quickly and see what he's doing with the Nkuhuma Pride, famed lions of Juma, and I'll see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone. As you can see, we're still with a really flat Nkuhuma Pride, and it's so frustrating for us because Junior and the other lioness are lying so close. And I know you guys heard from James that Scott was still with them and they were still fast asleep. And I was really hoping on the Sunset Safari that they might join up and we'll be able to be there for that reconciliation. But alas, animals beat their drums to a different beat to us, and we'll just have to fit in with theirs. And hopefully they do reconnect during the evening, even if we're not here, and we'll be able to follow up on that story in the morning. And they look so harmless lying there like that at the moment, and so calm, but they have a huge amount of latent energy, and especially as we come towards darkness. So, speaking of, I was chatting a little bit about man and lions and at night time, and Shanae from New Zealand would like to know a little bit more about if there are still man-eaters in this area or in the Kruger. And there are, most definitely, Shanae. I would definitely think there still are. And the reason that there are man-eaters still in this area is the Kruger National Park shares a very long boundary with Mozambique, and Mozambique at the moment is a very stable country, but in its past it wasn't. It was an ex-Portuguese colony, and then after independence there was a great civil war, and what happened is a lot of Mozambicans tried to flee to South Africa to find a better life, and that was during apartheid, and apartheid obviously didn't want any more people in the country, so they patrolled that boundary very heavily. So what you would find is it was called Jumpa Majozi, which basically means jump to Joburg, was to try get through the Kruger because it was the least protected of the borders and the easiest for them to pass between the security forces. A lot of people, hundreds and thousands of people, made that crossing. Oh, hello. We must also remember that when the country lines were divided, this was all done in Germany with no actual regard for cultural boundaries and whatnot. So you find that many Shangaan people, their aunties, uncles and cousins live in Mozambique, and basically the international boundary cut their sort of cultural and tribal land in half. So they had relatives on both sides. So what would happen initially is a lot of the Mozambicans would try to cross the Kruger during the day, and then the then South African Defence Force tightened up the defense of that border very tightly. So they started crossing at night, and they went into the lion sort of territory, walking through vast spaces of Africa in the dark, probably with our torches mostly to try avoid being spotted by the defense force. And you must remember, they were fleeing from a really, really ghastly civil war. So they were willing to take the chance to cross a lion-infested country to be able to possibly find a better life in South Africa. And so certain prides of lions developed a very big taste for human flesh and were well-known man-eaters, and former park rangers actually had to destroy whole prides because they even started coming into the camps and into the staff villages in the Kruger and actively hunting people, and not even at night. They became so brazen with their hunting of people, and it's estimated that over the last sort of 40 to 50 years, possibly as many as 150,000 people have been eaten by lions in the Kruger National Park. I'm sure it still does happen. There's not as many people doing the jump on my jaws, but it still does happen, and probably not as common as it was, say, in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, but definitely still a possibility. And I'm sure in those far-flung eastern reaches of the Kruger Park, there are still some man-eaters. From this area in particular, we're quite far from there, and there probably hasn't been too much man-eating in this area in the last 100 years. I think the last recorded case I can remember was in the 50s or 60s, actually in the Sabi Sand Game Reserve, where a staff member got had a little bit too much local brew and passed out outside his hut, and he was taken by a lion. That's the only real case of man-eating. It was quite an old lioness, and she had broken teeth. That is the only record of man-eating in sort of the last 60, 70 years I know about in the Sabi Sands. But Sinead, I hope that answers a little bit of your question. And man-eating in other parts of Africa is still very much going on, especially northern Mozambique, southern Tanzania, parts of northwestern Zambia and northeastern Zambia. But we'll save those stories for another day. Let's just have a quick look at this lioness. She's sort of posing for us right now. So guys, as we come to the end of this wonderful sunset safari, and it has been, I saw someone on Twitter put, it's been not Saturday but Catterday, and it certainly has. We had 4 different leopards on the sunrise safari, and absolutely incredible, and 2 different lion sightings, even though they were from the same pride. So what a fantastic Catterday rather than Saturday, and hopefully Sunday will bring just as much joy to everyone out there, and hopefully we'll be able to see whether Junior and that lost lioness reconnect with the rest of the Nkuhuma pride. But for myself, Brent and Brian, the Killer Bees, we say good evening, and we're going to cross you across to James for the last little bit of the sunset safari. Have a fantastic evening or morning wherever you are.
Hello everybody, welcome and good evening back to Sindile, who has done nothing since you last saw us. And I think that during the course of the evening he will probably knock about and go off and do various different things. Obviously this is now the ultimate time for a cat, the night time, when, especially on a windy night like this with no moon and no stars, he'll be able to walk around here almost completely undetected with that amazing camouflage that he has. And I mean, at his size, I think he's probably looking at things like scrub hares, which will come out at now, and possibly the odd roosting francolin unsuspecting in a tree, and that's probably what he'll be going for. Maybe a dwarf mongoose as the dawn breaks tomorrow. So it's been a fascinating day. Let's just have a quick little recap as to what's happened. First of all, this morning, well, no, let's go back to yesterday. We found him on his own, and then Tingana and Shadow were found mating, and that's his mother and father. Very early for her to have come into estrus again, so we're fascinated to see what happens there. and he will probably be okay, we're hoping, because he'll probably just tag along with her if she has new cubs. Then his grandmother was found this morning further off to the east of here. She's disappeared, as is her general wont. She's now stalking something in the undergrowth near the Umlulwati drainage line, which is near Twin Dams. So that's the leopard situation. And then we had a fascinating lion situation today. The Nkuhuma pride that was seemingly split in two by the Birmingham boys down on Nkoro, just over there. And I think they were on a kill or something, and they were chased off. They split up, and especially with Junior being probably extremely nervous of the 5 young males. He's definitely big enough to get away from them. He's probably not big enough to challenge them, and I don't think he's going to join their coalition. So that's what's happening with them. And yeah, so lots of action today. There have been elephants around the waterholes, there have been buffalo around the waterholes, and various antelope I've seen while I was on my walk, including some zebra. So action-packed day, wonderful fun. So thank you to all of you for all of your contributions. Yet again, you've raised the bar again, and we've had some wonderful contributions and questions, especially regarding animal behavior and anthropomorphizing animals, which I just think was fascinating. And I'd like to talk about it more in the coming weeks and months, because I think it is something so interesting and so fascinating. So a big thank you to Vium on the camera. Thank you, Vium. I'm sorry it was such a hungry time for you, and next time I think maybe a green pepper is what you should bring to eat. Okay, he's nodding vigorously. A big thank you to Tara and Kirsty in the final control, she with the red hair and unpronounceable surname, and Tara on the voice, and of course Brent and Brian the Thumb on the other vehicle. Also to Eugene and the technical crew who do such a magnificent job, and Steph who runs around making sure that nobody kills each other or that each other or themselves. It's very helpful having him do that. So I'm going to leave you now as this wind blows in. I think it's going to be a chilly morning, and we'll see you on the dawn safari tomorrow morning. Please join us then, and we'll see what else the wonderful delights of the Kruger National Park have to offer us. See you then, wherever you may be.